Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Monday, May the 23rd, 2016, and I have the very distinct honor and great pleasure of welcoming back to the show Mr. Andy Hoffman, who is the marketing director over at Miles Franklin. How you doing today there, Andy?
I'm doing good. Been up for a long time, doing a lot of stuff and a lot more to do as the day moves on.
Well, we're not going to take up too much of your time, and I know you guys just did a show over in Houston where you did the meet and greet. And how did that go? What all happened?
Well, it's just been a fantastic platform. That's actually our fifth such meeting this year. The one we did in Houston, this is Andy Scheckman, our president and co-founder, myself. It was a Q&A session that lasted 4 hours. It was hosted by Daniel at Future Money Trends. And by the way, that entire thing was professionally recorded, so it'll be up on the internet in the next couple of days. Our next meeting is going to be June 24th in Chicago, and I have some other big things in the works for the fall.
Very cool. That sounds great. And Daniel, he's a great guy over there at Future Money Trends. I really like him a lot and the work that he's doing.
Absolutely. And by the way, these meetings are entirely free. So if you do want to attend, just email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
Yep. And there's been lots of action, Andy, as you well know, in the precious metals markets. And what's happening over at Miles Franklin as far as the sales desk? Are you seeing a lot of new customers, returning customers stepping up, or what's happening with the premiums? Are they stable? Are they up? Are they down? What's going on there?
It's pretty stable right now. I mean, it's the dichotomy of the entire world versus what's going on in the United States, because you do quantitatively have all-time high demand. We had it in 2015, and this year we're blowing those numbers away. If you look at the import numbers and the delivery numbers around the world for gold and silver, heck, just look at the United States Mint. Their silver numbers are off the charts, and they're being allocated at 1 million ounces per week, and we're still going to beat very handily last year's all-time high, which beat the prior year's all-time high. So you're seeing a dramatic amount of demand around the world. That said, here in the United States, it's pretty muted. The premiums are relatively stable is a good word for it. Right now, we had a big surge of buying in January and February, but in my view, a lot of that has to do with the older customers, the prior stackers just coming into some money at the end of the year like bonuses and spending it. Because throughout the year, it's been, ups and downs, but nothing real special. We haven't had anything like last summer was incredible. We had a 3 months silver shortage, which were our 3 busiest months sequentially ever.
Wow.
And that was before we've had a crisis. I think we're heading into the biggest crisis ever now. So I think that this is the time to really, utilize the stability and supply that you can get here in the States right now, and the relatively reasonable premiums to take a stand to protect yourself from what's coming.
Absolutely. And I over the weekend, Andy, I know you put out a piece. I think it was on the 19th. I may be wrong about that date, but I wrote an article about this propaganda piece that showed up over the weekend. And like I said, I know you wrote about this topic recently, and the propaganda piece was about a, quote, flood of counterfeit coins, end quote, coming into the market. Are you seeing a, quote, flood of counterfeit coins, end quote, coming into the market? I mean, that just sounds ridiculous to me.
No, and I don't want to overstate it. It came, the reason we wrote about it was because someone we respect wrote an article about the topic, that it is a real factor that there is definitely counterfeiting in the market that didn't used to be there. However, it's very, very limited in scope, just to a handful of coins. And the point was not that you're going to get scammed by them, because look, probably, and we, for instance, are our primary mint dealer. We get almost all of our supply from the mints. In fact, probably 99% of all of our business, all of it, always is the primary market of getting coins directly from the U.S. Mint, the Canadian Mint. So the people who have been scammed are people who are buying at cutthroat prices, thinking they're getting a deal on eBay and Craigslist, not knowing who they're buying from. And, if you buy from us, not only are you going to get primary supply almost every time, but we have the top of the line detection systems. We could find, we'll never get caught with a counterfeit product, and we will guarantee the authenticity of everything we pay for. But the real key, as we've been saying all along, is that precious metal dealers are not commodities. You get what you pay for. And if you try to get the cheapest price out there, there's a good chance you're going to go get the fate of those who went with Tolving and Northwest Territorial Mint and Bullion Direct. And now in the case of these really good counterfeits that you're seeing on the internet, you can get counterfeited.
Exactly. And that was the point that I was making in the article that I wrote, that you deal with reputable dealers, and you shouldn't have any concerns whatsoever. And the article that I was citing, it seemed like it was directed more at people that were thinking about coming into the market or acquiring their first few coins or whatever, because of the way that the article was set up and the way that it was written. It was just like, oh my goodness, this is just ridiculous.
Yes, it was a marketing piece, but I cited it myself because there's a lot of truth to it. And again, I've written several articles, such as the one that says precious metal dealers are not commodities. I wrote that a few months ago, and it's a must read because it's really amazing. We thought, because we saw this company Tolving for years offering cutthroat prices, and everyone who said, can you beat with their price? We'd say, look, we are primary dealers. We buy cheaper than anyone out there. And if they are selling cheaper or they're selling at the same price with free shipping, they are losing money. So either they're a Ponzi scheme or they're going to go out of business due to bad business practices. And sure enough, Tolving not only went bankrupt, but they went bankrupt with tens of millions of client funds. And the same thing just happened to Bullion Direct, who was another one. Oh, you can't compete with them. And the same thing with Northwest Territorial Mint. Oh, you got to go with them because they're the cheapest ones out there. Look, first of all, the difference between the cheapest and something that's not the cheapest, like Miles Franklin, is we're talking about like basis points of difference. We're talking about maybe 5 or 10 cents a coin in silver, or like $2 or $3 a coin in gold. And yet people are willing to lose their entire life savings to go with unreputable people to save a few cents. It is unfathomable after what's happening with all these deals. Remember, precious metal dealership is a completely unregulated business. There's no rules except in our home state of Minnesota. How about that? We have all these regulations, a surety bond, credit checks. We check our employees, and most of the dealers don't want to do any business in Minnesota as a result. So we're the only state that has these regulations, and on top of that, we're the only company or one of the only companies that has no complaints, and we've been around for 27 years. Again, it's a lesson in life about you get what you pay for. And now that counterfeiting is a new additional thing to worry about, it just heightens even more the reasons why you should be careful what you're doing, especially this is not like you go into Walmart and just buying a gewgaw. This is, people are giving significant portions of their savings, and the goal is to protect those savings. So again, please be very careful what you do, people. It's so insane to get to the point where you're going to buy gold and silver and then lose your money because you're dealing with criminals.
With another set of criminals.
Yeah, and there's a lot of criminals out there. If there's one thing we both learned about the world, Rory.
Exactly. And speaking of criminals, there's a group over at the Federal Reserve. There's a group of criminals over there that have been blowing about raising interest rates in 2016. And they actually trimmed it from 4 interest rate rises in 2016. They announced that back in December and almost immediately retracted it and said, well, maybe 2 will work. And the next one is, quote, data dependent. How many more times, Andy, will the Fed raise interest rates in 2016? And how will the data, quote, data, push them over the edge to raise interest rates?
Oh, man, I'm so tired about this topic. The Fed, I can't wait till the Fed is gone so I don't have to write about their silly stupidness all the time. Look, first of all, I'll say to everyone, after what happened on Wednesday, because that announcement was Wednesday afternoon, the minutes, there was no announcement. They just published minutes, which anyway, first of all, those minutes are all doctored anyway. They just see what the market is today. And it's almost like they make the minutes now into like a de facto Fed meeting, because they change the minutes, they spin it so that they can, kind of guide expectations. But of course, what they didn't say anything in the minutes. It doesn't say anything about we're going to raise rates. And for all the hype about it, there, as usual, all they said was, yeah, if things go in our way, we'll raise rates, just like they've been saying for the past 3 years or 5 years in the past 50 or 70 FOMC meetings in which they've done nothing. And how are they going to raise rates this year? Of course not. They're not insane. The only way they'd be raising rates is if their goal is to destroy themselves, let alone in front of an election. I mean, it would make you start to think some of the conspiracy theories were true, because look what happened the one time they raised interest rates last year, when they pinned themselves in the corner after 3 years saying we're going to. So they did it, and they almost destroyed the whole world, and they had to backtrack on it. And now the economic data is much worse than it was then. So why would anyone think they're going to raise rates? In fact, the money market expectations for raising rates, even after Wednesday, are like 20% in June. And yet the spin is that they're going to raise rates. It's so insane. To me, they did it only for two reasons. One was this gambit of trying to get gold and silver back down. They've got the record short positions that just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, despite the fact that prices are way below their all-time highs. They just keep shorting and shorting. They're so scared. And they thought that, well, if we get this whole game going, we'll pretend that we're thinking about raising rates. Maybe we can use that to finally flush out the specs with these. Like, remember last week on Monday, there was a $2.5 billion naked short order of gold, on the COMEX. This is what they're trying to do. And the other thing, as they said in the minutes, is they actually are upset that the market isn't listening to them anymore, and they like to get people off balance and kind of, again, they didn't say we're going to raise rates. They just put out a couple of governors that say, yeah, we'll consider a rate hike in June if the data that's coming in supports it, and the data is not going to support it. In fact, data dependent. Like one month they put out an FOMC statement saying, we're worried about global events that might keep us from raising rates. And then a month or two later, the PPT gets the stock market higher. So they take that clause out of the FOMC statement. Well, guess what? Just last month, they put it back in. And instead of saying we're going to be watching global developments, now they said we're going to be watching global developments closely. So they added the word closely. And anyway, these data dependent, could be anything from the Brexit to a bad economic data to, God forbid, the stock market falls a couple of 100 points. But, they're never going to find another reason to shoot themselves in the head with a rate hike, let alone in front of an election. So that's what makes this June meeting now come. I put an article out right after it that said, right before it, that said the Fed own minutes could destroy it, because like in December, when they spent all year saying we're going to raise rates in 2015 and finally felt they had to do it to maintain credibility in December, this little gambit to get gold and silver prices down and assert themselves is going to put them up against the wall in June. Because if they don't do it in June, then it'll be the same thing. Their credibility will be destroyed. So what will they do? They'll find a reason not to, whether it's the Brexit or they allow markets to fall or gold and silver go up or whatever it is. You can be sure that come June, they won't do it, and they'll have an excuse as usual for why they didn't do it.
Well, they've always got an excuse for everything that they do or don't do. I mean, it's just, they have no credibility whatsoever.
And that's the whole point. They and all their compatriots overseas, the credibility is dead, and
shot.
And so it doesn't take much for them for an event like this. Now, people are going to see right through it this time. Let's say there is a flare up, like the polls in Greece. Or the polls in Britain are leaning toward a Brexit, or the OPEC meeting causes oil prices to fall a few bucks. That's on June 2nd. Or how about the Swiss? What if they actually vote yes on their June 5th referendum to give every family $100,000 a year for free? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that they can do. But even if they do use those as an excuse, the market in general will say, you were just lying all along, as you always were. And the next time you cry wolf, we're not going to listen. We're just going to take gold and silver prices up. We're going to take stocks down. We're going to vote Donald Trump in office, and we're going to do everything to destroy you.
You've mentioned the Brexit a couple of times now, and how do you see that whole situation unfolding, Andy? I mean, it seems like the people, the citizens are up in arms and saying, get us out, while the, so-called leadership is saying, well, we got to stay. And it looks like an extremely volatile situation there. And then if you combine that with what's happening with the Italian banks, and they seem to be in a lot of trouble once again, I mean, it looks like Europe as a whole could create some summer event that may be somewhat expected, but somewhat not. I mean, how do you see all of that playing out over the next few months?
Well, again, it all comes down to, can they hold financial markets up? There's more manipulation in markets than there's ever been, and yet it's failing. I mean, commodities are falling hard again, currencies are falling hard again, a lot of stock markets are falling hard again, and all of these things fuel the trend of, when it comes to referendums, of the governments losing. I mean, for a while they were winning. They won the Swiss referendum with market manipulation and propaganda. They won the Scotland referendum about 2 years ago, same thing. But then they lost the Catalonia referendum, and then they lost the Greece referendum last year. And you have this Swiss referendum coming up in 2 weeks. What if the people actually vote for hyperinflation? Maybe they will. As for Brexit, I wrote an article last week called "The Most Important and Precious Metal Bullish Election Ever." I really think that the Brexit election, or whatever you want to call it, referendum, is as important a vote as any we've ever seen in history. Because if they vote yes, we want to leave, against, as you note, the wishes of the government, the fear mongering, the
Yes.
prime minister, the generals will have World War III. If they actually vote against that, I mean, it's going to inflame all the nationalist fires, which are already simmering. Italy's a perfect example. France is right on top of the list.
Yep.
Spain with Catalonia. I mean, it's everywhere. Here in the United
Everywhere.
States, they're talking about Texas secessions again. It's everywhere. And so what will it happen? Well, first of all, I think everyone listening to this should Google Brexit, the movie. That's what made me write that article, because they did this great documentary about why it should happen. And, I've seen polls that say that the Brexits are in the lead, and other ones that say the Remains are in the lead. But the one thing I do know is that in the next 4 weeks, you're going to see a tremendous amount of propaganda and a tremendous amount of attempts to calm markets in front of it. Because if that is a yes vote, we're going to leave. Long term, it'll be great for the UK. But in the short term, there will be turmoil in the financial markets like we haven't seen since 2008.
What kind of an effect would that have on the dollar and the SDR, or would it have any effect on any of that at all? I mean, what impact would the United States experience from a Brexit?
Well, I don't think there's any such thing as an SDR. I think it's a figment of imagination of people like Jim Rickards and anyone who's trying to, for some reason, create the belief that there's going to be this one government out there. Why would anyone want to accept, if everyone is losing faith in all the currencies that are in this SDR basket, why would anyone want that? Who's going to administer it? The whole thing is just ridiculous. It's the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. And you know that there's a lot of things I think silly out there. As for the dollar, it's not a matter of what will happen to the dollar. It will be what will happen to financial markets in general. I mean, we're talking about the start of a major nationalist trend. And in that particular case, England or UK is the second largest economy in Europe. And so the ramifications politically and economically in financial markets are tremendous. If I had to guess what it would do in the currency markets, I would guess, as I've said all along, that it will cause the dollar to go up and everything else to keep crashing, which is not a good thing. It doesn't really mean anything good for us. It means the majority of the world are going to see a loss of purchasing power and probably resulting social revolutions, all kinds of bad things. And as for corporate America, they definitely don't want a strong dollar. And again, strong dollar doesn't mean strong against gold. Gold will explode higher. That's why I called it the most important and precious metal bullish vote ever. It just means that against other fiat toilet paper, that's what happens during crisis. Everyone goes to the liquidity of the still reserve currency, and that's how it will always be. Anytime I see people talk about how the dollar index is going to crash, I just think, what are you smoking? How could the dollar possibly crash against the euro? what scenario in the world would make the euro go up against the dollar over time? If there's even going to be a euro. And the same goes for the yen. I don't even think Japan is already bordering, moving from first world to second world nation. I truly believe it will be the first world nation to experience hyperinflation this century.
Do you think that's come? You said this century. That's quite a
21st century.
yeah. That's
Not within a century, in the 21st century.
okay. Or what kind of impact do you see Venezuela having on the rest of South America, and do you see that impacting the United States in any way other than giving us a full view of what could potentially happen here?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I mean, yes, there's a potential for oil disruptions, but I really don't think even in the worst case scenario they'd allow their oil production to fall off too much because that's the only source of revenue they have. No, it's more likely it's just, it's a precursor of what a lot of the world is going to see. Will the United States ever get as bad as Venezuela? That's a real worst case scenario. I hope not. I doubt it, although I certainly think parts of the United States are at risk in the worst case scenario. But again, that's happening. Look at the rest of South America. I mean, Brazil, where they're supposed to have the Olympics in 3 months, is not far down the road from where Venezuela is right now. Especially, I mean, if oil prices start to fall again, which it looks like they're starting to do now that the oil PPT is starting to lose its battle with reality, they'll go right into the same state. And Brazil is a lot larger country than Venezuela, and Argentina, as you know, is always on the verge of the next hyperinflation. I just think South America, for whatever reason, that part of the world is just prone to hyperinflation more than any other. And now that we're heading into the biggest money printing explosion in history, it's very likely that they are going to be cumulatively as a continent the poster child of what a lot of the world's going to see. And of course, nothing good can occur for the United States when major parts of the world are experiencing such financial turmoil.
Last little thing here, Andy, and it's more of a personal question. How would you define success? How do you, Andy Hoffman, define success? And why do you do what you do?
Well, if you're talking about broad success in life, it would mean having peace of mind and knowing that you've lived well and you've made others, including yourself first, and others, have made their lives better. And as far as why I do what I do, well, I mean, let's face it. Number one reason is I need a job to support my family. But look, I was doing this exact same thing long before I was at Miles Franklin. When I was first writing on GATA for free back in 2003 or so, it's the same thing. I feel very strongly it empowers me to talk about the truth, which fortunately I know more about than most people, and I find that it empowers a great many people when they hear people tell truth, and then all of a sudden over the years, more and more people like yourself start to come out and tell the truth and spread the truth. So I really feel that there's kind of a domino effect as this network of truth builds, and I think that I'm a small part of it, and that makes me feel happy and successful.
That's a great answer, and I really like it, and I think that you're pretty well spot on with that, with as far as what you do impacts others and entitles them, or they feel empowered to speak their own mind and seek the truth for themselves.
I mean, when it comes down to it, Rory, we all only live once, and as we were discussing before this call, our ages are we're not 20 years old anymore. So we only have so much time left on the planet to make an impact on our own lives and on other people's lives. And it's probably, how many times are we in history where you're on the cusp of history, where so many big things are about to occur. Sadly, most of them for the worse. And we're in a position to influence them in a small way. It's very rare, and I'm proud to be doing what I'm doing and to be associated with people like yourself.
Same here, right back at you, and that is a great spot to end. And Andy, I certainly appreciate all your time, all your wisdom, and all the efforts that you put into what you're doing, because you are one of the people that just continually pumps out work over and over and over, and it's always top shelf. So you can find Andy Hoffman at milesfranklin.com. And you've got another event coming up shortly, right?
That's right. Remember, Miles Franklin, we've been one of the largest dealers in America for the last 27 years. So again, 800-822-8080. We'll answer all your questions, and I assure you it'll be a good experience. And as for our next event, it will be June 24th in Chicago, again, entirely free. And now I'm in the process of getting ready my fall schedule, but for now, June 24th in Chicago.
Sounds great. Well, we'll look forward to it, and we'll do a follow-up with you in the not-too-distant future, Andy.
Look forward to it.
Same here.